Next division winner, what we will review is from the Scotia North division, and our prediction shows that Edmonton Oilers will be the number one. How do you see it, Tommy? I think this is a team of only two players, but can they pull the trick and win the division?
We've been waiting for that team to do something for 10 years, I think, about. Now they do have two of arguably the best players in the league, offensively at least, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, who scored about 1.5 points per game last season. So they are really hard to contain. But if the opponents are able to do that, then what is left with the Oilers? That's something that we'll have a look at. Of course, the simulations show that they are winning the Northern Division, which is not that high quality. Actually, the lower teams are pretty bad, at least according to the simulations. And then Toronto is the biggest favorite according to Vegas lines, and they are second in our simulations as well. So it's quite tight between Oilers and Toronto. Funnily, because they are pretty much built the same way, really offense-heavy teams, and quite questionable in the back end. Last season, of course, Oilers were fifth, showed some promise, played occasionally really well, but then were again in playoffs quite lousy and let Chicago beat them 3-1. And it was definitely something a little bit worrying because Chicago is not any sort of contender. So something that Oilers need to do better is to find the motivation to play these a little bit lower level teams. But I don't think that's a problem against the Canadiens, because they will definitely have some rivalries going on, meeting each team 9 times or 10 times in a season. But of course it takes Draisaitl and McDavid again to actually bring their best game for Oilers to have any sort of success. Obviously in our simulations they do, but in reality, let's see how it goes. How have we been doing in the simulations? Have we been expecting McDavid and Draisaitl to score 1.5 points every game?
During the last 3 years, it's quite interesting to see that bookmakers have provided reasonably low odds for Edmonton compared to our simulation. So there's only 14% of the games at home where have we seen some positive expected value, and 27% of those games on the road. So there hasn't been too much to bet for Edmonton based on simulations. On the road, accuracy has been pretty good. Out of those games, we've been able to get 57.6% correct, and that results $1,146 pure profit during the 3 seasons. Back-to-back home games seem to be difficult for Oilers because they won only 33% of those, and the season starts actually with back-to-back home game against Vancouver. So it would be worth to check on Friday that what kind of odds there is available, and is this something that we would bet against Edmonton. How about the roster? How do you see that matchup against other, let's say, both old division rivals like Vancouver and Calgary, and the new Eastern Canada teams who are coming from different divisions?
Yeah, it might be a pretty good match actually, because the Canadian teams don't seem to have very good defenses. If you take a look at Vancouver, if you take a look at Toronto, Winnipeg is famously lousy in defense. So unless they make a lot of moves, of course, but so far, so it's something that the Oilers can probably cause some havoc among those teams. Of course, then the newcomers that they haven't faced so often, like Ottawa and Montreal, are big question marks by themselves already, that how they are going to play. But I think the matchup in the North is quite nice to Edmonton compared to what they played previously. So it's interesting to see how the mini playoff style and all the rivalries and everything, how does it go for the Oilers team? But they do definitely have a little bit of an advantage when playing up north. But how do the matchup look like in the past?
So Edmonton is quite interesting team because they've been able to match pretty well against any team, but they haven't dominated too much. So against Calgary, for example, their win percentage is 46, against Vancouver 50. Then Winnipeg, interestingly, has been very difficult for Edmonton. They won only 22% of the games. They've faced Winnipeg 9 times. And then out of those Eastern Canada teams in North, Ottawa only 40%. They have faced Ottawa only 5 times in the last 3 seasons, so they won 2 of those 5 games. Then Toronto, you mentioned, has been very difficult for Edmonton as well. They faced 6 times, and Edmonton has only won 1 of those, so 16.7% win percentage. And then Montreal, vice versa, Edmonton has won 5 out of 6 games, so over 83% win percentage. So not a clear trend in any direction, and better teams or worse teams not really reflect here. But of course, Edmonton's previous seasons have been also quite roller coaster. They haven't met the expectation. For example, 2 years ago, maybe over exceeded a little bit based on what we've seen then earlier. But how about the roster nowadays? Top of these 2 guys that you mentioned and 2.5 meter tall Finnish goalkeeper, is there anyone else that we should take a look?
Yeah, they added a little bit of depth now. They've been, like we've said many times, it's still a team of McDavid and Draisaitl, of course, leading the 2 top lines. You can basically put anyone next to McDavid and probably score 50 points, so that's not a problem. So they do have excellent top 6 players. There is now added depth by Kyle Turris, Dominic Cahoon, these guys that are not actually top level, but they are able to perform, especially if they are placed among the superstars. Of course, we're interested in Jesse Puljujärvi, the 4th overall pick in 2016, who's now been growing up a little bit in Finland and has a second chance to make it in the NHL. So it's an interesting aspect especially for the Finns to follow. In Edmonton, always the goalkeeping has been a problem, or at least a little bit of a worry. And however, we trust Mikko Koskinen, I think Mike Smith and this big guy from Finland are not actually the best of goalkeeper tandems there. But for one reason or another, Edmonton keeps on trusting these guys. So let's hope that they can provide some goalkeeping for them this time around. The defense is okay. It's not actually top level, but there is a lot of potential. And again, their roles seem quite set. So Darnell Nurse, of course, young guy, almost Norris level player in the future at least. Adam Larsson, Swedish guy, approaching his prime, finally finding his defensive prowess that he's been expected to play. Ethan Bear broke through last season, also a young guy. So of course, Oscar Klefblom is out for season, so it's a worry. But Tyson Barrie arrived from Toronto to fill in that gap and provide some offense there. So combined with the uncertain goalkeeping, I'd say this defense is a little bit worrying, but they have the potential to step up all of these players. We probably haven't seen the best yet, so it's up for the coaching staff of Dave Tippett to find a way to solidify the defense, because Edmonton will score enough goals, especially in the regular season. Then in the playoffs, we'll see when the matchups go a little bit, let's say, tighter. Maybe the other teams are able to shut down McDavid and Draisaitl more. Then the secondary scoring will have to step up, but that's almost half a year away. So let's focus on the regular season. How about our simulations? How have we been doing with the Oilers?
So in season simulations a year ago, we didn't really believe them, and numbers were very, very low. We predicted them to go under 85.5 points. When season was stopped in 71 games, they have collected 83 points. So I would say that most probably they would go over, and our prediction was not correct. Then 2 years ago, we predicted Oilers to go over 91.5 points, and that season was main disaster for the team. They were second last in the Western Conference and got only 79 points. And then 3 years ago, our prediction was that Edmonton will go to playoffs and stay under 104 points. Final result 3 years ago was that they were for sure under. They got only 78 points, but couldn't reach the playoffs. So bit roller coaster for them, bit roller coaster for our predictions. But how about now? What kind of oddsters available and what kind of line bookmakers are setting up for the season total points for Edmonton?
Yeah, even if we have the Oilers winning the West, winning the North Division, it's not such a surprise actually when looking at the odds, because they are the second team rated second in the North by the odds makers as well. So the odds to win the division are at plus 300. Of course, then winning the Stanley Cup, they're only 12th overall with odds of plus 2,200. So even if the odds makers do believe they are matching quite well in the Northern Division, the Stanley Cup seems like a pipe dream at the moment, which I do agree that they have a good chance in Canada, but then in order to win the Stanley Cup, they need to beat the likes of Tampa Bay, probably Colorado. So that's too much to ask. Then to take a look at the line is set at 65.5 points. Our simulations have about 9 points more, so there is some value according to the simulations if you trust these numbers. And I think in the regular season, Oilers have the chance to actually score a lot more points than these 65.5. So there is probably some value to have there.
Yep, that sounds good value. We bet over 65.5 and pray that two center top players are healthy from the first game of regular season until the last playoffs. We don't care so much.
Yeah, exactly. If you score 1.5 points per game, two players do that. I think that's enough goals to win the Northern Division.
Sounds like a plan. We'll see if it happens.
Yeah.